So what is attachment? Well, attachment can be defined as a unique emotional bond between carer and child that involves an exchange of comfort, care and pleasure. The roots of research on attachment began with Freud's theories about love. However, John Bowlby's research usually credits him as the father of attachment. Bowlby described it as a lasting psychological connectedness between human beings. Bowlby shared the psychoanalytic view that early experiences in childhood have an important influence on development and behaviour in later life. Our early attachment styles are established in childhood through the infant-caregiver relationship. Bowlby believed that attachment had a basis in evolution. He wrote, "The propensity to make strong emotional bonds to particular individuals is a basic component of human nature." He effectively believed it was a human given, that attachment was something that was biologically built into us. So we're going to have a look at the characteristics of attachment, and there's four major ideas in attachment. One's called proximity maintenance, the other's safe haven, secure base and separation distress, and I'm going to just explain a little bit about those in the next slide. Proximity maintenance is the desire to be near the people we're attached to, and we see this in children, don't we? If a caregiver or a parent strays a little too far away from a child, they tend to want to come back to the caregiver. Safe haven is returning to the attachment figure for comfort, safety in the face of fear or threat. So if something scares or frightens a child, they're more likely to run to the caregiver or parent. Secure base. The attachment figure acts as a base of security from which the child can explore the surrounding environment. So children run off to explore their world and make their world bigger, but they always come back to the carer or parent afterwards. They come back to a secure base. And finally, separation distress, anxiety that occurs in the absence of an attachment figure. And we see that sometimes if parents leave a child in a room and then just go out, once the child is cottoned on to the fact that the caregiver or parent isn't there, they can get sometimes anxious or distressed. So let's have a look at the type of attachments that Bowlby talked about. Well, the first one is called secure attachment. The second he called ambivalent attachment. Then he went on to coin the phrase avoidant attachment. And finally, disorganised attachment. And as the presentation moves forward, I'm going to be expanding on these ideas. So the characteristics of a secure attachment is, as children, we're able to separate from parents, and that leaves us as adults having lasting, trusting relationships. When parents return, we're met with positive emotions, and that leads, as the theory would tell us, to be in adult life comfortable sharing feelings with friends and partners. But it's all basis on the caregiver's behaviour. So let's have a look at what the caregiver has to do to promote what we call a secure attachment. Well, the caregiver responds appropriately and promptly and as consistently to the needs of the child. The caregiver has successfully formed a secure parental attachment bond to the child. So this is about responding appropriately to the child and is consistent to the child's needs.
Welcome to Therapists Uncensored. I'm Ann Kelly.
And I'm Sue Marriott. So why don't we jump right in, actually. Why would anybody bother to sit here and watch a video and learn about attachment? What's the big deal? You sitting there, wherever you are, have an attachment system. And if you have a healthy attachment system, it is a bona fide elixir for mental health and physical health and emotional health. And I feel like Mattress Mac. I'm like, not only will it help you understand yourself better and help you make friends better,
Parents
and
better physical health. The more
Exactly.
securely attached you are, the better
it
physical
affects cardiovascular,
immune system.
the
It
immune
affects
system.
the immune system.
it affects our parenting, which then
Right.
therefore affects our children. But not only that.
All right, in this section, we're going to talk about what is attachment. You hear the word, we throw it around, but what the heck is it? An infant comes into the world completely dependent on their parents. We feed them, change them, comfort them, play with them. But our most important number one job is responding to our infant's distress or fears. How a caregiver responds to their child's distress is the core of the attachment system. It's the bond that directly impacts the development of how we can control and regulate our emotions as we grow up and as adults. That's why it's so important to build the reflective muscles of our brain and learn about attachment. Most of the attachment research to date has identified 4 distinct attachment types: secure, preoccupied, dismissive, and disorganized. Let's quickly review them now. Secure attachment.
When things go right, naturally occurring secure attachment. I thought it was a Bigfoot, but it never happens. You know, it's like there's been spottings and sightings, and
Shockingly, more than 53% actually really do land in a secure place.
So if you had parents that were sensitive, warm, loving, and responsive to your distress, you're likely to have developed a secure attachment style. You know, parenting is difficult. We all get overwhelmed at times, and nobody can respond in this loving, caring way all the time. But 70% of the time, if your parent's able to, you're likely to have developed a secure attachment style. Basically means as an adult, intimate relationships feel comfortable. You're not scared of healthy dependency. That's really important. And you also feel comfortable being alone and independent. So, basically you believe you're lovable and you have a lot of self.
One of the great fallacies that many scientists have is that everything that is before birth is genetic and that everything that is after birth is learned. This is not the case. There's more genetic material in the cerebral cortex at 10 months, much, much more than there is at birth. What this means is that the genes are spinning out, are programming well into the first year. They don't stop at birth. And the genes that are encoding the connections between those parts of the brain that are coming on later, therefore, are in a very active state well into the first year.
The new technology of brain scanning gives dramatic insights into the functioning and development of the brain, and the vital role played by early childhood experiences on the brain structure. Throughout the first 2 years of life, the brain cells and their wiring are established, closing down connections that are seldom or never used, and reinforcing the ones that are often used. In other words, sculpting the very matter of the brain. The surface of a newborn baby's brain looks quite different to an adult one. One of the few parts that's well developed at birth is the brainstem, at the base of the brain, where it meets the top of the spinal cord. It's part of the brain known as the subcortical or primitive brain, and it's responsible for the basic functions of life, including the emergency survival reflexes of fight, flight, and freeze. Higher functioning areas of the brain can only start to work properly once they've developed an insulating sheath of myelin around each nerve cell.
That is, the lower parts of the brain and the brain stem, etc., are well advanced at birth, but many parts of the cerebral cortex are not even myelinated at birth. They're not even, essentially at birth you've got a subcortical infant there. And parts of the human brain are not coming online until well into the first year. So as a matter of fact, at 10 months, at 12 months, which is the first time when the attachment patterns are measured by the strange situation, I've suggested that the prefrontal areas now for the first time are coming online.
Babies are born with a powerful instinct that motivates them to elicit as much care and attention as possible from their caregivers. Babies and toddlers then learn by experience the best way to form relationships with each individual caregiver. Babies can only form a very few close attachment relationships, and to do this it's essential for them to have continuous relationships with permanent caregivers. The baby will develop a special lasting bond to one of those permanent caregivers, who becomes their primary attachment figure. Usually, but not necessarily, the biological mother. But the other attachment figures, including father, remain vital for the child's well-being.
The growth spurt of the brain is occurring from the last trimester of infancy through the second year. And at that time, the brain is more than doubling its size. It's connecting up. But its maturation is experience dependent. It's not as if the genes are encoding how everything is going to fall together. It needs certain types of experiences for the brain to grow. And the most important parts of the brain that we're looking at in the first year to grow by my own thoughts are those parts of the brain that are involved with the emotional and the social functioning of the child. Those are the ones which are embedded in the attachment relationship. In order for those parts of the brain to grow, which is part of the limbic system involved with emotion, certain experiences are needed. Those experiences are embedded in the relationship between the caregiver and the infant. If they're positive, if they're regulated, then we'll have an optimal situation, and literally the potentiality of the genes will be carried forth to the fullest, so to speak. And so now one of the most important recent discoveries in the last 10 years in biology has been this idea about developmental cell death. The brain does not continue to grow and grow and grow. It organizes, then it disorganizes, then it reorganizes. And the disorganization of the brain, which is the massive death of billions of neurons and the disconnections of synapses, is part of how the brain is growing as it's reorganizing. Those connections that are not used die off, which is why early enriched environments, which means emotionally and early enriched environments, more so than wonderful little dangling colors and shapes, are key here. As if to say there's something necessary that the human brain needs in terms of other human contact for it to grow. It's a use it or lose it situation. Cells that fire together, wire together. Cells that do not die together.
All babies are individuals, and they modify their nurture-seeking strategy to cope with the emotional capabilities of their particular caregivers. Not all caregivers will be able to provide sufficiently responsive and sensitive care for the baby to form a secure attachment. Under these circumstances, the baby may use an indirect approach to its caregiver in order to elicit as much comfort and attention as the caregiver can manage to give. And an insecure attachment relationship may become established. This is the period when the brain is undergoing major structural development, and the connections the brain cells are making at this time will influence the pattern for making new relationships in the future. There's a strong tendency for the quality of the relationship with the primary attachment figure to become the dominant and long-lasting internal working model of relationships as the child grows up. Alan Shaw uses co-regulate to describe the emotional and neurochemical effects that the mother and child have on one another.
The genetic systems that are encoding the connections of the highest parts of the brain that are involved in social emotion functions, which are literally the hierarchical apex of the limbic system, are spinning out at 10-12 months. Those genes are being affected by the hormones that are being stimulated in the relationship between the mother and the infant. Because when the mother and the infant are in a dyadic dance, when they're attuned to each other, the work of Hofer is now showing that literally their psychobiological systems are co-regulating each other. And that, for example, their opiate systems, their endorphin systems are now mutually regulating each other. But we know for a fact that the endorphin systems regulate genes positively. We also know that cortisol, which is the stress hormone, also directly regulates genes. What I'm saying by this is that the attachment relationship is directly regulating the genome. It's directly regulating the way that the genes are going to encode the proteins, etc. This goes far from the idea about what is nature and what is nurture. They're coming together, and it's been said that literally the first gene-environment interactions are found in the psychobiological interaction between the mother and the infant.
One thing that usually happens in a child's early experience is they develop a sense of connection with other people. By caring about our infants and children, we not only teach them to accept care, We give them the experience of and the sense of being fundamentally connected with other people. It's this connection that underlies empathy and fundamentally underlies the control of aggression.
If the carer is able to respond to a baby's cues for attention with sensitivity that's neither too slow and neglectful, nor too abrupt and controlling, but appropriate and predictable, the baby will start to develop a confident and trusting relationship. There are no hard and fast rules to this behavior, but if the carer is in tune in this way, the baby develops a sense of secure attachment and high self-esteem.
In fact, it's probably rarely examined. I don't think children with high self-esteem think as they start their day, well, I'm secure, things will work out for me today probably. It doesn't have to be examined. It goes without saying. It's a certainty. It's part of them. What I mean by that is it comes from inside. It's an abiding belief that things will work out for you.
A carer who can see the baby as a real person and is responsive to the baby's attempts to communicate will give the baby an opportunity to have a straightforward and confident relationship. The baby then has a positive model of how another person feels towards them, essential for forming long-lasting friendships.
Attachment is that faith, that sense that we can turn to one special person or persons when we're lonely or when we need something, when push comes to shove, they will be there for us no matter what. They'll be there to soothe us. They'll be there to care for us. They'll be there to understand. That is what secure attachment is.
Secure attachment, very specifically about the fluidity of emotional intimacy. And what this means is that in relationship, we move in and out of relationship. We are close to a person, we feel emotional connection, and then we move out, we move back, and we experience a sense of separation. And securely attached partners, securely attached people in relationship, we're able to move in and out of this closeness, and then life happens, you know, the Monday morning comes around, or something shifts. We could even go through a whole period. It could be, you know, a little chapter for the next couple of months. Now we're living a little more separate. And that securely attached people, if you have a secure attachment style, you're not going to, your nervous system, your mind is not going to trigger some level of fear. And oftentimes for insecurely attached, if there's an insecure attachment style, it means that this level of intimacy when we're moving closer can sometimes serve as a trigger and feel unsafe. And then also the opposite is true. There are some attachment styles, some insecure attachment styles, where when we're separating and we're distanced from our partner, that creates anxiety. And so a securely attached couple, and for an individual who has a secure attachment style, there is an ability that our brain and our nervous system is able to move in and out of this relationship dance, of this emotional opening to each other, and then we feel that we need to take some distance and go live our life and do something else and connect with friends. And we're still maintaining our love, we're still maintaining our caring, we're still keeping ourselves available to each other. But it's okay that we have separation, and that it's okay that we're distancing. And then the same thing holds true that when we are able, when we're in more proximity, when we're sharing time together, or it could be, you know, on the phone, how we make ourselves available for a phone conversation that's emotionally present. And so that a securely attached person, to have a secure attachment style, means that you're able to go there. You have a willingness to engage in emotional exchange, and that experience of exchange is what's called emotional attunement. So in this video, we're focusing on the key word here is the fluidity, A securely attached person can move in and out of closeness and separation with a sense of ease. And to move in and out of closeness and separation does not trigger an alarm of anxiety that perhaps if we get too close, we're going to be smothered and feel enmeshed, or if perhaps we get too separated and disconnected, then I'm going to be rejected and abandoned and feel, completely isolated. And so, for secure attachment, the fluidity, the coming in and out of closeness to separation is happening with a certain amount of ease and is not triggering an alarm. And for those of us who have more of an insecure attachment style, it means that we have limitations in our ability to have this function of fluidity, and that we have some limitation around being okay when we don't have our preferred style of the degree of intimacy that we're looking for. Be it if you really want to, you're more inclined to want to stay close and connected and have emotional connection, or perhaps your insecure attachment style is that you're more inclined that you want to be distant, maybe even at times guarded or avoidant. And so for a secure attachment system, we're looking for to practice this fluidity, that it is okay. It is okay to move into close, intimate proximity and to experiment with safety and trust. It is also okay to move away, to separate, and to individuate, so that we're not with our partner all the time, and that we can manage this separation and still know that we're loved and that we're cared for, and that we have a solid, secure foundation to rely on, of emotional connection to rely on, even when it's not actually playing out in real time. It's the ability to utilize the skill of moving in and out of, to be fluid with, emotional intimacy.
The idea of asking for help emotionally. Is that something that just kind of...
Why did I just shudder?
just kind of scares the hell out of you? Or you kind of see it as unnecessary. So, and if you can think about it, in our culture, we can get a lot of positives about being independent and not needing somebody and not being, vulnerable. But the idea of being able to be connected to your own vulnerability and it being safe to be with somebody in it rather than... And one of the ways to tell is what happens when you get really distressed. A secure individual is more likely to turn towards another human, towards a relationship to help you soothe. Somebody in the blue might be more likely on a regular basis to turn out, to do activities, to move away from relationships.
To smoke, to eat. There's a lot of externalizing and sort of more acting out in order to regulate.
Right. Even biking and excessive exercising. Alone. Right. Yeah. Not that that's not good, but it's actually, when you're upset, do you lean out and you do these activities? And that can be a good way to handle being upset, but it's also a way to bypass needing a relationship. So now you come back and you're completely zipped up. I don't need you. I've got it. I've taken care of myself.
That's right. And some of the research talks about, in particular, kids that have parents that lean towards blue end up literally physically, their facial expressions are inhibited. So they're less emotionally expressive than even other kids in insecure categories, like kids with parents that are disorganized or kids that are with parents that are preoccupied, are more visually transparent. They show what they're feeling. But in particular on the blue side, on the dismissive side, we learn to zip up and kind of shut down visually. Here's the coolest part of this whole thing, is that what it looks like is either, oh, those are really good kids, they never cry. That's a misnomer. Or it also looks like, oh, that child has shut down their need for people, so as mom leaves, they're going to play their xylophone. As mom comes back, they're going to still play their xylophone and they don't need anything. But that's actually really wrong. That what the research shows is that those kids need connection. So I will say, those of us who lean blue need connection just like anybody else. But what we'll do is we'll back into it. When you really closely observe infants or toddlers that have parents that have had to shut down themselves, what you see is they don't directly approach the parents, But what they'll do is they will have their back to the parent, but also still maintain some closeness. And they figure out how close to get before the parent pushes away. So there still is proximity seeking. There still is a desire to be close to the parent, but they've learned to kind of hide it in order to maintain closeness. So I think that's actually really cool. So it shows that even though we're zipped up, it's not that we don't need people. It's that we've learned that by being zipped up, it's the way that we can get close to people.
Yeah, that's exactly how it comes across as you develop as a child. And then oftentimes somebody that has full blown and developed in a more internal working model that's solidly blue, you might not even recognize that you're distressed, that it does become difficult. It's not even that, oh, I'm distressed, but I can't show it. There is an overemphasis on, like you were saying earlier, on the intellect. It might be challenging for you to listen because in order to do that, you have to accept that you have vulnerabilities and you have to accept that you have insecurities. And for someone to mention that you have some insecurities, that might be a little threatening.
It might be actually really threatening.
Exactly.
Because that one of the ways we've been able to be safe in the world is by going around that. You know, how we talk about it is that on the blue side, we're more intellectually oriented and it's more cognitive or more thinking. And then on the red side, it's more feeling with less thinking. So sometimes it looks pretty wild. But where we want to, again, move towards is an integration. So if you're a little too intellectual and rational, if anybody's ever called you Spock, then again, that's a clue. And what we want to move towards is get you interested in feelings and non-rational fantasies, experiences in your body and what's happening in your body. We want to get you more connected. Like in The Wizard of Oz, you would be the Tin Man who's looking for his heart. And we want to get you more connected and open in your heart and in your needs. And again, what Anne's saying is that you might be reactive to this or try to, again, dismiss it and say that it's not important or move away from it in some way. Just say like, yep, got that, done that, had a happy childhood, I'm finished with that. Like those are all ways to deactivate curiosity and openness and connection, but we don't know it when we're in it. But when we can relax our little rear ends and let people bring us things and take care of us and attend and attune to us, it ends up feeling pretty good. What often will happen if we begin to activate our attachment, because see, our attachment system has been deactivated.
So let's say what we mean by that. The attachment system being deactivated, what we mean is that the idea of needing a relationship in an interdependent way has become too threatening, so that you become more of a singular system and that you can self-survive. It's like, I got it, I can take care of myself. If that's your biggest goal, in fact, the biggest fear of a dismissive personality is the loss of self. And so to fear the loss of self, to become interdependent could create an anxiety in you. Because that would mean that you couldn't just rely on yourself. You would actually need others. And that can be very scary, right? Which what you're saying is we need to activate our needs and activate our desire for interrelationship, that what that may end up inducing in you is like, oh my God, I do have needs. And if you start opening that up, you might experience a little vulnerability in tapping into that.
Actually, in the green, and somebody's trying to approach you interpersonally, it's less threatening. And so if you're in a relationship with someone that is blue, you often will feel, just like Anne's saying, that you might get the eye roll or you might feel silly or stupid for your emotional needs. But I want to tell you you're not. And the person who you're trying to reach needs you to keep trying and maybe to learn the art of seduction. You don't want to yell at them like, come to dinner, you know what I mean? Because that's jarring, because they're in what we call an auto-regulatory state, which basically means they're taking care of themselves. They're not in an interpersonal state. And all of a sudden they're poked, you know what I mean? And it's very aversive. So instead it's like you want to maybe walk into the room and touch them and be sweet, like,
can I talk to you?
Yeah, dinner's going to be ready soon. When do you think you'll be ready to wrap up on that computer there? You learn the art of seduction. You don't give up, but you also don't know that normal interpersonal relating might feel like an invasion.
That's so important. And to recognize that feeling of invasion isn't about you being too much, because it's really easy, especially if you're in a romantic relationship with somebody that's being dismissive towards you, to think that you aren't worthy or that they don't want you, rather than recognizing that their system, I love how you just put it, Sue, is so auto-regulated, so independent, that somebody coming into that system actually throws the system off, so it may engage in a negative get away from me because their whole system just got overwhelmed.
Yeah, that it's kind of jarring. And what health looks like and what the green looks like. And
the secure.
That's right. We want to keep always moving towards that. That's what this whole point is that you're able to be alone and independent perfectly well, but you're also able to flexibly roll into more of an interpersonal connected realm. And then when that, when there's a parting or a separation, you're then back to being okay in an independent way. And so that's what it looks like. So if you're over there and you're wondering, okay, I'm over there, what do I do? Then the next thing is we want you to get more curious and interested in relationships. Let yourself move towards a little more dependency. We need to activate your attachment system. And believe me, what that looks like is you suddenly need to talk to somebody or you are a little insecure when they don't call you back, or you text them and they don't text you back and you start getting a little, preoccupied. Things begin to matter in this way that might feel really weird. You'll go from feeling overly secure, which really means disconnected, to insecure. But that's good because it means now you're doing the normal attachment behavior, which is you're looking for contact with people. You're seeking, what they call it seeking contact, which just means we want to hear from people and we want to know they're still there for us.
Right. And so what you're doing is you can recognize that you're attuned to the outside world and you're wondering about the relationship and thinking about how they relate to you.
That's right. And that is very cool. And we want to give you lots of kudos for that. And that's the direction we're going in. And then the other thing is I want you to look for people and notice, because this is something we're really bad at, is because of the flatness. Remember we talked about the facial flatness of these kids. They have to learn to almost have a mask on where they're not showing something. But then what we're doing as we grow up is we're robbing people of knowing that we love them and that we want to be with them. And it's only because that was how we were treated, or that's at least how we experienced the world. So I'm saying a lot here, but what I mean is we want to gravitate towards people that we feel are happy to see us. And if you're in a relationship with someone that leans towards blue or is a little bit more dismissive in their orientation, then I promise you want to have emoticons. I always imagine emoticons all around my head that are super happy faces and I'm so glad you're home. The default system inside somebody that's on the blue side is that they're not wanted. And so the antidote to that is to be so clear that you want them.
You're talking about as if you love somebody or with somebody that falls on the blue, that to really emphasize the sense of delight when you see them, which may be hard to do.
Right, because they're not giving you that.
Right, we tend to match our partners. Our mirror neurons tend to match. And somebody who really falls on the blue, the left of the continuum, might be a lot more flat-faced, not responsive. They come in, and in that transition, they're actually not ready to actually see you. And so it's so easy, especially being with somebody for a while, to then match them and to go flat-faced and to not be very responsive. So I love what you're saying. Instead, push in and go, I'm so happy to see you.
That's right.
Show
give
delight.
Give them the kiss. Give them the hug. Because if we don't watch it, what we unintentionally do is we deactivate people around us.
Exactly.
And then we end up in these parallel systems, which is more comfortable for that person. And it's more comfortable for the person who keeps getting rejected and their happiness. So again, if you're the one that's on the blue side, you want to really work on your expressiveness. Here's a little trick. Imagine whoever it is that you think of that you need, whoever that is most important to you. This is going to sound kind of morbid, but imagine they get hit by a bus. And the reason I'm asking you to do that is because, if they suddenly were not in your life anymore, that's a way to feel whoa, that would kind of suck. We aren't typically in touch with our need, but if we can wipe them out suddenly, and we can feel a clutch in our stomach, no, I wouldn't favor that. Okay, there it is. That's the need that we want to really, it's like a little kindling of fire that we want to grow.
Right, so you're connected to your desire and your wanting. and your need for that person.
Right.
And sometimes we have to, maybe not a bus, that might be a little dramatic.
I hope that this video is helpful. Thank you for watching. If you